Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we first talk about how COVID-19 has impacted the performances of school-going students in the country. And then we talk about demolition drives that have been going on in Delhi and the reason why they have become controversial. And in the third segment, a ground report from Chhattisgarh about a protest that has been going on for over a year now. And we start by talking about the COVID-19 impact. A large-scale central government survey, which was conducted back in November, has now revealed that the learning of school-going children has been significantly impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. The performances of students in subjects ranging from math to social sciences have all taken a hit. This is according to the National Achievement Survey, which had looked at 34 lakh students across states and union territories. In this segment, Indian Express's Sourav Roy Barman joins us to talk about it. So Sourav, what are the kind of things that the survey looked at to assess the performances of students?
See, the National Achievement Survey is essentially an exercise to find out or understand the hold of our students, their hold on any subject, be it social sciences or languages or maths. It tries to capture whether our children are actually learning in schools. I mean, they might be going to schools, our enrollment ratio might be going up, our attendance rate must be going up, but are they actually studying in schools? And in case they're attending classes, are they actually learning what they're supposed to learn? So simply put, it tries to capture a student's understanding or hold on a subject or say concepts or applications.
And what this survey tells us is that performances have actually taken a hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Could you tell us the extent to which that has happened?
Yeah, so the NAS is usually carried out once in 3 years. So the last round of NAS was in 2017 and the next round was supposed to be in 2020, but due to the pandemic, it had to be postponed. So the current numbers we have is of the NAS round, which was carried out in 2021, last year in November. So this test was held in November last year. It covered some, as you said before, 34 lakh students across 1 lakh schools and across 700 districts. So as you can see, in terms of scale, it's huge. So now, if you do a comparative analysis of 2017 and 2021 figures, there has been a clear dip or it's a very stark decline in the performance indicators across grades. So this NAS covered students in classes 3, 5, 8 and 10. So there has been a clear decline in the performance of students. For example, say in class 3, 2017, the national average score scored by students in maths was 64. So now it has come down to 57. And say in maths, in class 5, the national average score was 53. It has come down by almost 9 percentage points to 44. So it is a big decline.
And there have been indications of this happening in earlier reports as well, right? Like in the Annual Status of Education report, the ASA report, for example.
Exactly. So ASA also carries out its own flagship survey. So they also, evaluate learning outcomes. But the only difference is ASA being a non-governmental organization, the sample size is much smaller compared to the NAS. So yeah, but in case of ASAR, they did some field surveys in some states like Karnataka, in Chhattisgarh, in Bengal, and they did actually capture something very similar.
Okay, so nationally we know the performances of students have taken a hit, but does the survey also tell us how states have done individually? Like, are there states that have done better or worse than the others?
Yeah, so there are states like Punjab and Rajasthan, which have done exceedingly well actually. So if you look at the national average score in maths, in class 5, it's 44. But when you look at score of Rajasthan, it's 53. So they are 9 percentage points more than the national average. And even in class 8, the national average in maths is 36. On the other hand, Punjab has scored 50 and Rajasthan has scored 46, Haryana has scored 42. Whereas Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, they are actually much below the national average. So yeah, there are state-wise variations as well.
And can we see differences in subjects as well? Like, do we know, for example, if math scores in particular have come down?
I mean, the mathematical skills of students have been hit particularly hard, clearly, if you look at the numbers, but it's not as if, their understanding of social sciences or, the natural sciences have been less hit. The impact has been quite uniform that way.
And do we know what all factors would have impacted the performances of children? Does the survey say anything about that?
So, see, the NAS report does not spell out the possible reasons behind this performance. But if you look at, say, ASAR report, and ASAR report maybe it provides some indicators or clues. I mean, it's not really rocket science. Students have been away from physical classrooms for long period. I mean, after the first lockdown, in most states, schools were the first to shut down and the last to reopen. So the factors are many, including, long school closures, prolonged school closures, plus digital inequity. And even the NAS survey points out that as many as 24% kids who were surveyed, say 24% out of 34 lakh kids, they actually said they don't really have access to any digital device at home. So it is very obvious, the reasons.
And sort of with the performances of students taking this bigger hit, is the government planning to make any interventions?
Yeah, so the government had actually issued a learning recovery plan in February, where it had actually instructed the states and the union territories to prepare for a post NAS intervention, phase. So this basically means that every state and every UT will have to look at their own set of indicators and data, and they'll have to prepare a local or district specific plans on how to make improvements. So they will have to actually now plan interventions based on these numbers.
And next we talk about New Delhi. For the past few weeks, demolition drives or anti-encroachment drives have been taking place in the capital, and they have been talked about a lot. From local newspapers and magazines to some international radio programs and television channels, they have all covered this issue. Visuals of bulldozers destroying shops and parts of buildings is something you probably have watched yourself. But the thing is that these drives have actually been taking place for quite some time. For years, in fact. But then why have they become a political issue now? To explain this, Indian Express's Abhinav Rajput, who reports on Delhi politics, joins us. Abhinav, to begin with, could you talk about what exactly happens during these anti-encroachment drives? Like, what kind of demolitions do we see during them?
So these anti-encroachment drives are carried by the civic agencies in Delhi, and all kinds of civic agencies, whether it is DDA, whether it is MCDs or PWD, they carry these drives on their properties. The idea is to get their properties the right of the way cleared, to reclaim their properties. And such drives have been happening for a decade now, more than that. But around 4 years before, there was a special task force formed. That was because the court was very angry upon how encroachment was shaping up in Delhi in one area after another. There were constant complaints of, ambulances being trapped, and whether it is judges or other people, they used to be caught in the jams for long hours. So there was a concrete action on it, a special task force formed, and such drives since then have been happening across Delhi on a routine basis, weekly basis, monthly basis.
Okay, so considering the fact that these anti-encroachment drives have been happening in Delhi for a decade, and this special task force you mentioned also came up some 4 years back, then what is the reason that these drives are generating controversy now, and the entire matter seems to have become political?
So when these anti-encroachment drives have been happening, and forget, media following it, nobody even came to know about it, that where it is happening, how it is happening. But it all started with the Jahangirpuri incident, where, after the riot, the Delhi BJP chief Adesh Gupta said that they need to teach rioters a lesson, and they asked the mayors of the MCD to bring bulldozers on the road. And bulldozers brought in a riot hit area which had not been seen in Delhi earlier. And then these bulldozers struck down on several properties. And since then, as we saw political leaders coming on the roads and asking them to stop such drives, and it had a huge coverage. It was a riot affected area, and there was such drive being carried.
Bulldozer justice is going to play out on your screens in a matter of minutes from now as security has been beefed up in Jahangirpuri, the area where there were communal clashes just a few days ago. The anti-encroachment drive was organized by the BJP-led MCD after the Delhi BJP chief Adesh Gupta wrote to the mayor asking him to identify illegal constructions by quote-unquote rioters and demolish them.
हालांकि इससे पहले भी एक दो बार एमसीडी की कार्रवाई हुई है, लेकिन हनुमान जयंती की हिंसा के बाद इतने सख्त कार्रवाई के जरिए एक बहुत बड़ा संदेश दिया जा रहा है.
This was not a routine drive. Even MCD is not claiming that it was a routine drive. What MCD said later was that because they had enough force in the area due to riot happening around 2-3 days before, so they carried a drive in that area. Neither the BJP, which ruled MCDs, claimed that it was a routine drive. They also said that they wanted to teach Bangladeshis and Rohingyas a lesson. That's why the drive was carried.
Yeah, and this Jahangirpuri was one incident, but then after that, the mayor of South MCD, he gave repeated statements that they will carry out this anti-encroachment drive in Shaheen Bagh, which again was seen as a very politically motivated statement because of the kind of neighborhood Shaheen Bagh has been and what it represents. Could you talk about that a bit?
So Shaheen Bagh is not any other area. When a mayor of a BJP-ruled state, BJP-ruled MCD will give a statement that they want to carry a demolition drive in Shaheen Bagh, Okhla, it will become a headline. And Shaheen Bagh, as you know, that it was the epicenter of the CA and RC protest. So he went on to give statements, and later even one in anti-encroachment drive was attempted, though it was not carried in a way they wanted to because it was politicized. Congress and Aam Aadmi Party leaders came on the way. Except for, one or two or three these drives, most of the drives that had been carried was routine drives. Routine, when I say that there were complaints in the area, there were really a lot of encroachments in these areas. Not that other areas there were no encroachment, there was encroachment. But as you know, the intent was being questioned of Jahangirpuri and Shaheen Bagh. But other areas, there were anti-encroachment drives carried, and we saw a lot of media coverage. The reason why we saw a lot of media coverage, a lot of attention was because Delhi BJP had intentionally planned to showcase that they want to bring the bulldozer model of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh into Delhi.
Yeah, in Uttar Pradesh, what we have seen is that the Yogi government has been targeting criminals through these demolition drives. Although there are accusations that the administration there has also targeted minority communities through this, but they do seem to be targeting criminals essentially.
So when I talked to a few of the BJP MPs of late last week, then most of them said that this is not Uttar Pradesh model. And Aam Aadmi Party has also successfully been able to paint Delhi BJP that this is not Uttar Pradesh model. Because in Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh, arguably, I'm not saying this is the case, but what it appears or what BJP is able to successfully transcend the message that these are pick and choose drives against criminals, against some even say that they're political opponents. But these are not area-specific drives where riot would have happened. But in Delhi, what happened after 2-3 drives, the impression that was coming that BJP is now doing area-specific drives, whether it is New Friends Colony, Dwarka, Patiala, most of the areas they carried drive. Not that these drives were not carried earlier, it was being carried earlier also, but now BJP was giving its name to these drives, that it is BJP who is leading the drive, it is BJP who is conducting these drives. Because what BJP leaders told me that they got carried away due to the initial euphoria that they got after Jahangirpuri and Shaheen Bagh incident. So the media coverage and all, after a point of time, they got carried away and they started giving their name to all such drives that yes, we are going with these drives. And what Aam Aadmi Party smartly did is that we're able to paint it as rich versus poor. That it is poor people who are being targeted by rich leaders of MCDs.
Right, because in most of these anti-encroachment drives, it is the poor and the middle class that end up being affected.
Yes, what happens is that when MCDs clears its right of way, in those cases it is mostly poor people who are affected because the right of the way you'll see juice shops extending its boundary, or on footpath some shop has come, somebody has put it as a temporary shop. So it's naturally footpath and roads, rich people won't occupy it. Having said that, I don't mean that rich people don't do encroachment. In fact, they do a lot more than poor people. There's hardly any locality in Delhi, whether it is posh locality like Lajpat Nagar or South Extension or Defence Colony. In every area, you'll see encroachment. At least you'll see the roof being extended, the chhajja being extended, and these are very costly lands. So when they do encroachment, even in monetary terms, it is a lot more than a poor people doing an encroachment. But what happens is that to clear those permanent encroachment, you need to give them notices and you need to give them 1 week's time to clear it. If they don't clear it, then you go and clear it. And it is not easy to clear those encroachments, but because then a lot of questions will be asked. First thing is that you can't clear one person's encroachment and then go away. Then the neighbors, he will say that why are you not clearing the neighbor's encroachment? So where will you stop? We will have to touch 1/3 of the houses, which is not an easy thing in some localities at least. Second thing is that there will be questions asked because BJP has been ruling MCD for past 15 years. And in these past 15 years, the population of Delhi has increased by 1/3, which means that if present population is around 2 crore, these at least more than 30 to 40 lakh people came or 50 lakh people came during the area of BJP and built their houses. Not came, but built their houses. So they will have to answer these questions that if there are so many encroachment, it is BJP ruled MCD which is responsible for 1/3 of the encroachment in Delhi because these encroachments came in their period. So these are tough questions that they will have to answer, and it is not easy to target a rich person. As you know, there's influence, there is vote bank, there's a lot of issues. Unlike, a right of way, which is easy to clear. Again, I'm not saying that it is illegal to clear these right of ways because ultimately there are a lot of incidents where ambulances are being trapped, pollution increases when your vehicles get trapped. But the ground reality goes like this.
Okay, so coming back to the reason why these drives have been politicized, we can trace it back to the Jahangirpuri incident, the attempted drive at Shaheen Bagh, and the Aam Aadmi Party changing the narrative to the BJP targeting the poor. But considering all of this, what do people of Delhi make of it? What do people getting affected by this make of it?
See, Aam Aadmi Party has a vote bank and BJP has a vote bank. So, though in the same segment people vote to different parties, but Aam Aadmi Party is mostly these people living in Chuggis, people who are from lower middle class background. They are known as traditionally Aam Aadmi supporter. They switch from Congress to Aam Aadmi Party. Reason being those freebies that you get, free Bijli Party. It is they who are getting benefits. And BJP has those middle class votes and all. So, naturally, even if your house is not targeted, even if your property is not targeted, if one property in Khichdi is targeted, there will be a fear among 10,000, 20,000 more properties that they know that it's not easy to touch their properties, but still there is fear. So, during the time of election, they might think, why to take the risk? Just have a party which will keep you safer. So those are the risks that after a point you go into. Because we have seen earlier also that when sealing was happening in Delhi, it was BJP ruled MCD that did the sealing on the instructions of monitoring committee, which was put. And it was BJP MP Manoj Tiwari who went and broke the ceiling done by their own MCD. So politicians are known to take a popular stand. They don't go by the rules. They don't go by what is right in the rule book. They generally take popular stand. But here what we saw that opposite happened. Earlier, I was talking to some of the deputy commissioners. They told me that earlier it was difficult to do these drives because it was politicians who used to come and tell them that you can't do this. But now they are not stopping them. They are, in fact, some of them are taking credits for it. Because of this Jahangirpuri incident and the way spotlight was thrown, and it in a way recharged your cadre, it gave you that image which we see in Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh, how leaders take credit of those bulldozer drives. So BJP leaders also thought that they could replicate those model in Delhi. But politically what happened is that they couldn't stop where they should have.
And in the end, we talk about Chhattisgarh. Last year, in the village of Silgair, which lies in the Sukma district, 3 people were killed and several were injured when police opened fire at a group of tribal people that had been protesting in the region. Among those who died included the 37-year-old Kawasi Vaga, 32-year-old Korsa Bhima, and the 22-year-old Uika Murli. All of them had been protesting a newly constructed CRPF camp in the area. And since the killings, a sit-in has been going on at the site for over a year now. In fact, on their death anniversary, hundreds of tribals from across 30 villages gathered together and raised slogans against the administration. In this segment, Indian Express's Gargi Verma, who went and spoke to many of these people, joins us to talk about it. So Gargi, just to take a step back, could you tell us why people had initially been protesting against this CRPF camp that had come up in the area?
So the original protest started on May 11th, which is when the Mokur camp was set up at the outskirts of Silgir village. The protests that the villagers had started off with were very basic. Their demand was that the land that had been taken for the camp was privately owned land, and those people were neither informed nor were they given any compensation before the camp had come up. So the first protest started from there. And then in Bastar, the tribal voices have always been very strongly opposing the CRPF camp. Because of the various brutalities committed in the past, the tribals fear that a lot of things sort of get snatched when the CRPF camp comes nearby. The tribals are also the opinion that instead of investing in the settlement of a CRPF camp, the government should rather invest in, say, schools and hospitals and other developmental needs. Without them, if you're just getting CRPF camp, activists and tribals of the area believe that these are the beginning of a police state when you're heavily guarded by the security forces. While security forces are needed in Bastar, this is a rough battle that is being fought between the government and its people about the need and the positioning of these CRPF camps. So the original protest was against the camp for these reasons. However, the protest sort of turned over its head on May 17th, which was supposed to be the last day of the said protest, which had been going on for almost a week. The tribals, as they recall it, the residents of Silgir village, they had gone to raise a last Hail Mary before they could go back to their homes because they had run out of their supplies that they had travelled with. And that is when they were fired upon by the security forces, who have claimed that there were Naxals present in the crowd, and those were the targets that the security forces were aiming for.
Yeah, and this is something that tribals and the families of those who have been affected have strongly denied. Also, we know that in this firing, 3 people were killed. But even apart from this, there were 2 more people who died shortly after. Could you talk about how that happened?
Sure. We realized it very honestly when the actual memorial came up at Silgir, which was one of the demands of the tribals. They didn't just have the 3 names of the men who had died at the day of the protest. There were 2 more names added to it. One of them was a woman, Punem Somli, who was pregnant at the time when she had come to attend the protest, and she had fallen in the ensuing stampede after the firing. Her family took her to the village that they were from, but she eventually succumbed to her injuries, and that is one of the women. And the other man, who was named in memorial and is also now being considered as part of the Silgir deaths, was a tribal who had left his village to come to the Silgir protest site, but was picked up by police, or that is the claims by the protesting crowd, that he was picked up by the police and then he was beaten to death in police custody. The man's whereabouts, however, are still not known.
Okay, and this happened over a year ago. And since then, there has been a sit-in that has been going on at this site. Protests have still been on. And during the death anniversary of these killings, hundreds had gathered. You were there for it. What all did you see?
So the protest that has been going on for over a year has been very cyclical. Not the same people have sat on the protest for a year because it's not possible or affordable for the protesters to do so. However, since there are these 30 villages, 3 districts almost, somebody or the other has always been at the Silgir protest site. However, for the first death anniversary, which was on May 17th this year, there was a 3-day event that was organized by the Moolwasi Manch, who are the organizers of the Silgir protest. And the Moolwasi Bachao Manch held a 3-day event where these villagers travelled from their villages and stayed at Silgir for 3 days. On the day of the anniversary, there was an event stage set up inside the village. Several guests, several civil rights activists and professors had come to talk to the people of Silgir and show their support. They also got support from the Hasdeo Bachao Sangharsh Samiti, who's a group of tribals fighting on the other end of the state to save their jungles. During the day, they also sort of took out a rally from the village to the CRPF camp where they raised slogans. Now, these slogans, interestingly, were not just demanding justice for the people, but were also against both the central and the state government. While they were calling the Home Minister and the Prime Minister traitors of the country, they were calling the Chief Minister and the MLA of the constituency traitors of the state.
राजद्रोही कौन है? राजद्रोही कौन है? हक के लिए लड़ेंगे, हम हक के लिए लड़ेंगे, हम हक के लिए लड़ेंगे।
People were also exchanging stories from their own village about police brutality, fake encounters, just the kind of daily hurdles they have to pass just because of this entire new hurdle of police and security camps around their houses. At the night, they also had some time for the families to come and share their stories, whatever they had been feeling, whatever problems they had been having because of the loss of a person in their family.
And Gargi, one of the things that you mentioned in your story is that the government has been trying to placate these people, but they haven't had much success doing that. So what kind of things has the government tried to do in this regard?
So since the protest has been going on for a year, there has been multiple levels of conversation between the government and the protesters, right from getting the ground level officials to political parties have gone and visited the protesters. The protesters also traveled to Raipur to meet the chief minister. Apart from just engaging in direct dialogues with the protesting team, the government has also stepped up building developmental indicators around the village. The village now has a newly built PDS ration shop. It now has an under construction, community hall. It has a hospital less than 5 kilometers away. It has a paved road that goes all the way up to the village. Roads are one of the rarest commodities in Bastar. So having a road directly to your village also puts it on a map, right? So there were also camps set up for villagers to get their Aadhaar cards and their ration cards and birth and death certificates to be made so that they don't have to travel all the way to the district headquarters. So the government has been trying to extend its reach to the village to be able to ensure that these people know that their priority was not just the CRPF camp, or presence of the CRPF camp is bringing a lot of other infrastructure to the village. However, for the villagers right now, their biggest grouse against the government is that these are too little too late. These come following the death of the people or the aggressive protest mounted by the residents of the villages. That is one of the primary reasons as to why is this outreach program of the government not really working on the ground.
Okay, so considering the ongoing protests and everything else, are we seeing Silgair slowly becoming a political issue in the region?
So political parties like the BJP, the Congress, and even the recent Janta Congress, JCCJ, set up by late Ajit Jogi, representatives of all political parties have gone to Silgair, have sort of conducted their own fact-finding mission and have visited the protesters and the people who've lost family members. However, on ground, it doesn't look like politics has yet entered the scenario. So many people I spoke to did not think that they could trust the government anymore, especially after the firing had happened. Because, the men who the government claims is out there to protect you are the same people who are firing and killing you while you're trying to put your point across. Their faith on the entire judicial system seems to be dwindling because they can't understand as to why somebody who's killed 3 people doesn't even have an FIR registered against them yet. So the protesters are so frustrated that they claim that they don't want to vote for either of the parties. They don't want to vote for the ruling party or the opposition BJP, which was in power for 15 years in the past.
इनको हम वोट नहीं देंगे, अब की बार कांग्रेस बीजेपी को नहीं देंगे। जो हमारे जवान लोगों को ऐसे कर रहे हैं उनके नहीं देंगे, जो किसान के लिए नहीं कर रहे, जो हमारे आदिवासी के लिए, हमारे जो बेरोजगार भाई बहन लोगों के लिए नहीं कर रहे, हम उनको वोट नहीं देना, चाहे वो मोदी हो, अमित शाह हो, भूपेश बघेल हो, रमन सिंह हो या कोई और हो, हम उनको वोट नहीं देंगे।
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.